Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. I'm a little under the weather today, so if I sound a little froggy, just
All good. I hope you feel better. What is it? Just a regular cold?
yeah, just a little regular cold. So I just flew back to Arkansas from California, so it's probably just weather difference.
Where in Arkansas are you?
Northwest Arkansas, so Fayetteville area.
Gotcha. I've only spent time in Little Rock, when they used to have the festival out there, which I don't think they even have it anymore.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Northwest Arkansas. It's a little hidden gem. So alrighty. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll try to make it quick. First of all, congratulations on your film release.
Thank you.
How does it feel to have your first feature film in theaters?
Feels feels like I feel like the big moment was South by Southwest, and it was that like premiere and having you guys there and having friends and family and the cast and stuff there. Um, and the like mad sprint to try to get it all done before South by too. After that, I just sort of like I'm like, okay, time to move on to other things. So it's cool. It's really great that the movie's coming out and people get to see it, but it almost feels like a little incidental compared to like the high of South by.
Right. Yeah. Kind of the journey of it was a
Yeah.
bigger high than everything else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So most of my questions are going to be kind of just about your creative process and how you kind of go about making your projects and your short films, your feature films, and stuff like that. So my first question is, why did you, why did you choose to become a director in film? What kind of inspired you to go down this path, this career path?
Yeah, I started first wanting to be a writer, and that was pretty early on. I was maybe 13 or 14, and I had seen adaptation, the Charlie Kaufman movie, and that was like to me like my favorite script ever. And I just thought it was like so fun. And obviously it's about writing, so it really like shows that, even though it shows writing, and how torturous it can be. But
Hmm.
I just remember thinking it was so exciting and fun as a script. And um yeah, I don't know. For me, it always started with that. It always started with like telling stories and finding new ways to tell stories. Um, uh, yeah, always loved movies. Just don't know if it ever seemed like a real career until then I went to film school and like met other people and was like, oh, okay, there is like something you can do here. But
Hmm.
even before I saw it as a career, I just saw it as like something that seemed just really fun, like a fun puzzle to solve, the writing of a movie.
Yeah, yeah, completely makes sense. Um, what is your creative process of creating a story? Do you find a concept and build around it, or do you kind of start from scene one? Um,
Usually it starts with, I have a lot of random ideas, a lot of disparate ideas that, for example, with Omni Loop, we've got black hole in someone's chest and time travel pills, and there's a lot of ideas that I always have floating around in my head. But usually it starts with an emotion, like a feeling, something that I want to explore, especially something that I can't quite wrap my head around. So with Omni Loop, it was thinking about death and the permanence of that. With my short film yearbook, it was just thinking about going to film festivals with an animated short and thinking about how many movies there were in the world, and not even just shorts, but all the features and all the movies that have been made before, and just thinking, how do you make work knowing that everything we make will kind of be forgotten in a way. And then sometimes it's sort of smaller feelings like I made this movie Hudson Geese, and that was really just thinking about I had read a sentence about the Sully uh plane crash, and it was like, you know, it had the phrase something like uh a whole herd of geese or something like that. It was like an entire herd of geese. And it had just enough of a phrase for me to like imagine like, oh wow, there was a whole herd. Like this was a whole group of geese. And I remember feeling something. So then you just sort of latch on to those feelings.
mhm.
and you're like, I want to tell something about this. And then you just kind of try to follow the feeling to an honest place and to a sort of natural conclusion. And hopefully by the time you get somewhere, you've reached a place that like you've said something about this thing or you found some sort of closure with it.
Hmm.
But yeah, usually it starts with a feeling and then thinking a lot about that feeling, ruminating on that feeling, different ways that it expresses itself and different ways that it's that you can see it in the world.
Gotcha. And I guess this can play a factor in your writing process and filming process. But do you find when you're on set, the story evolves, or do you try to stick to the script of the story and the storyboard? So right now, for example, I'm writing my personal short film myself right now, and getting all the scene layouts in CG, and as I go and go and go, I a new shot pops up in my head, and it just keeps on evolving. So I started with 25 shots, and now I'm almost 60 shots in. So do you kind of find yourself kind of having that same feeling while writing and on set?
Yeah, for sure. And it's there's so many like funny little balancing acts that you have to do with film, and that's also one of them, knowing like how much to like be flexible and how much to sort of be strict about like, no, this is what we were doing. Because if you commit too much in either direction, then you sort of lose yourself, right? If you kind of just go with whatever the flow is and whatever your idea is in that moment, you might lose sight of like what you actually like started with, and it might just like turn into a mishmash of things.
Right.
But similarly, if you're too stuck to what you want to do, it might feel flat or, it might not have that kind of like spontaneity and magic that I think is like the bedrock of cinema.
Hmm.
So I think the simple answer is that they say you make a movie three times, like first when you write it, and then when you shoot it, and then when you edit it. And I think that's true. I think it's also true on a micro level where you have to carry what you're feeling that day into whatever you do. So if you planned beforehand to write a scene about two people talking in a coffee shop, but then that morning something crazy happened to you, when you sit down to write that scene, you almost have to let that crazy thing make its way into it because otherwise you're not fully connecting to the thing.
Hmm.
So you try to always be present in the moment and engage with things in that way. But yeah, with OmniLoop, I was very conscious about the fact that film is a collaborative medium. Obviously, I'm like over planning everything, I'm over preparing everything, I have storyboarded everything, but it's not just me making a movie, it's also my DP making a movie and getting to express her art through that, and it's the actors getting to express their art as well. So if you trust collaborator, if you like hire great collaborators and people that you really respect, it's really easy to trust them. And then it's really easy to just like let them take it a little bit more further from your head and more into something they want to do. And then that's naturally going to change the movie too. And sometimes it's always important, I think, for us to keep in mind that for for all we plan, for what is the expression? All the plans of mice and men. For what is it? Man plans, God laughs. All
Yeah.
those things where it's just like, you make so many plans and all this stuff. At the end of the day, the universe is going to do what the universe does. My girlfriend's in Miami right now trying to shoot a movie, and they had to pause because, of course, hurricane came through, and we don't have, it's not all up to us. As much as we think it is, there is another force at play, and it is a force that affects the weather, but also affects everything else that's going on around you. And sometimes that force also wants to participate in the making of the movie. And sometimes you have to kind of open yourself up to the universe in that way.
Hmm. And I know you mentioned at one point that this film's been kind of a process over 10 years. Um, do you feel that when you first started this writing this script about 10 years ago, and to now having it fully completed, do you feel like when you started film writing the script, do you feel like what your expectations of the film was going to be were met or exceeded, or do you feel there's some things that um, you wish you could kind of change? Kind of looking at it now.
Uh, I think I would say on the whole, the movie kind of, I won't say it exceeded my expectations because I don't know if it was a matter of expectations, but I will say it became a better movie than the movie I would have made 8 years ago, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there are things while I was editing that I was like, oh, I realize now how to solve this story problem, but it's too late. So there are things that, like, if I could go back and change it, I would have changed it then, but they're stuck and the movie is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think specifically because of all the things that my collaborators brought to it. So, production design wise, cinematography, the actors, all the VFX, like all of that stuff makes the movie better than I could have made it on my own. And so naturally, it exceeded my expectations just because my expectations when I started conceiving of it are limited by what I can do and are limited by my imagination. So the more people I brought on, the more that was able to expand and grow into something else. The funny thing is, when you're working on something for so long, you're naturally going to change as a person, and the things that you're going to be interested in are going to be different, years later. So there's certain things that I really loved when I was 26 and I started writing the movie, but now I'm like, I don't know if that's the best thing in the world. But I think that's also a great thing about film is that it becomes a snapshot of who the filmmakers were at that time and what it was like to make that movie in Miami in 2022 and to be there. Um, yeah, the movie is somewhat timeless in that people can watch it forever, but it will always be stuck to that time and who we were at that time. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And you mentioned bringing on, a DP and having a good group around you. When you were building that team, were you very picky on the people you chose? Did you have anything that sometimes you have limitations when it comes to who you can afford, and or were you very picky on the DP and the actresses and the actors and stuff like that?
Yeah, I feel like I was very lucky to be able to kind of get to work with all the people I wanted to work with. That doesn't always happen,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say for me, what I was looking for, I wasn't necessarily interested in like, oh, this person just did this thing on Dune 2 or anything like that. Like I was more, I wanted to talk to people that I felt like we had a good rapport, that we could communicate easily, and
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like I understood their emotional core and they understood me. And I would often look for people that were coming at it from a different way in, but still coming from that same emotional core. So my DP Ava is a great example where I think I naturally have a more sort of like, I don't want to say silly, but a more like animation style, a more cartoony style. And she's much more raw, real, you know, low contrast, high grain, very physical, tangible cinematography. And I thought that was perfect because I thought that would help ground the things that I wanted to do, as opposed to me working with a DP that's like really into all the silly, wacky stuff. And then all of a sudden we go too far in that direction. So I
Right.
was always looking for people to be sort of counterweights to me, people who are super talented, but that could fill in the gaps where my weaknesses were, so that they can sort of offset what those weaknesses are. And so yeah, it was really about looking for people that were additive to the process and weren't just redundant and weren't just like echoing me,
Right.
people that could challenge me on certain things, but also people that I felt like understood the emotions that we were making the movie with. That was the most important part to me, and especially with the actors too, just being able to have those conversations where we really talk about life and what it's like to be a person, and that I felt like we're really communicating and we're not just like, being like blah 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 Hollywood Hollywood or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and speaking of which, when it comes to directing and writing, what do you feel is your your strength as a writer and a director, and what do you feel is your weakness, your biggest weakness as a director and writer?
I'll break those into two separate answers and talk
Mhm.
about writing and directing separately. As a writer, my biggest weakness is being repetitive, being redundant, feeling like I need to over explain something to the audience. And that naturally has to do with just how I talk and how I am in general. I'm going to say the same thing a couple of times. I'm always scared that people won't fully understand what I'm trying to say. And so sometimes, you know, even in a conversation, I'll repeat myself, but especially in making movies, I end up getting a little bit repetitive in that sense. And the actors were really good at being like, you don't need this line. We can get rid of this line. We don't need that. My biggest strength as a writer is, let's see, it's hard to take credit for a lot of things, but I'll say that um, biggest strength as a writer, you know, there's two things that come to mind. One is I think I'm very good at capturing a specific feeling, but I don't even know if that's a strength necessarily because sometimes I'm like, is that the only thing I can really write? So instead I'll say I when I'm writing, I'm already thinking about the edit. And I think that's a interesting strength I have that on the page, I'm already making editing decisions and the edit of the movie almost comes holistically at the beginning at that point. And I think it's an interesting strength to have because I think a lot of people sometimes just write without knowing what they're going to film. And I
Mhm.
write not only knowing what I'm going to film, but how it's going to cut together and how that all comes together. I'm proud of that. As a director, weakness is I don't enjoy being on set. I find the pressure really tough. I really find it very grueling. Um, I'm not a naturally like extroverted person. It really tires me out. And I don't have the like, all right, everybody, we're making a movie, which some people really have. And I think really helps the crew and really helps the cast. I think people like that excitement. 2 weeks into making a movie, I'm like getting the set like, and I think that's something I would like to get better at. In terms of a strength, I think um I think I know what I want and I'm maybe not the best at communicating it, but I do know what I want every time. It's very rare that there's a situation where I'm like, I don't know what I want. I could get better at communicating it for sure. But even when it seems like I don't know what I want and I'm telling the actors they can do whatever they want in the back of my mind, I know exactly what I want. So I would say that that, that is a strength.
Yeah, and you mentioned
Easier
with
to say the weaknesses than the strengths, I'll be honest.
yeah, yeah. I find that difficult as well. You like to pick at what things you can try to work on
Yeah.
easier. And you mentioned your strength with writing is you're thinking about that edit while you're writing. Um, do you when you're creating a story, do you feel that you're like a map? You can kind of picture each shot in your head as it transfers between shot one, shot two, and that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm trying. If I can, sometimes I'll write really fast. The first version of a scene, I'll just write it just to get it out and I'll try to get the words out as fast as they come to me. And that's almost more just like impulsive, instinctive, improvisational, just like here's the scene.
Right,
But then when I'm going back in and sort of like ironing it out and filling it out, I either will very quickly know like this is how I'm doing this is how I would shoot this, or I will not allow myself to move on until I've figured it out, until I have I never want to write something that I'm on set and I'm like, I have no idea how this would work.
right,
Everything I'm writing out, I know what the blocking would be like. I'm sometimes I'm doing floor plans and blueprints. I like designing spaces. So it's important for me to be able to visualize that stuff and I'll do a lot of definitely a lot of like floor plan drawings just to be able to like imagine what that space looks like, even if it doesn't end up being that space,
Right.
just to have something that feels real and grounded. So yeah, sometimes it all comes really easily, and then other times it's really just about sitting down and being like, okay, how would that actually work, and walking around my apartment and trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. One of the things I enjoy doing is reading a script of a big feature film. And some of the scripts I've read while I'm reading, I'm just blown away on how a director has taken that script
Yeah.
and turned it into a big movie. Because in that script, it's almost just a book, and so now the director has to create his own scene. So it is cool to kind of see your own kind of, I guess, unique way of going about your writing process. Yeah. Have you worked on other writers' projects, or do you tend to only have only filmed your own short stories and feature
Um,
films?
I don't think I've directed anything that anyone else has written. I maybe have done like animation for friends and things like that, and I've helped out in other capacities, but never as a director, I don't think. But I've written for other people, and that's very fun. But yeah, I don't think I've ever adapted someone else's writing. I'm trying to think, but I really don't think I ever have.
When you're writing for other people, do they have like like a concept idea and then you create the story, or do you tend to, you're the one building the story for another person
Yeah,
to?
it really depends. Some people have a lot of ideas. Some people have a lot of like characters and visuals and scenes, but they don't quite know how the story all works together. And that can be really fun to try to like figure it out. Some people are just like, oh, I have this type of idea. I've also written in writers' rooms where it's a very collaborative thing. You know, you're writing a TV show, but you're writing it with like 15 other people or 10 other people. Um, so it really varies from project to project. My favorite way of working is with someone that has a lot of visual ideas, a lot of just like, really cool moments and ideas and all that, but doesn't quite know how to structure it. I love the puzzle of structure, and I really like figuring out like what the most interesting, not even necessarily the best structure, but what the most interesting structure, the most inventive structure would be.
Hmm.
Um, and I find that a really fun part of the process. So anytime I get to like really focus on structure, I love I feel like I'm good at writing dialogue and I'm good at writing that stuff. But the stuff that I get really excited about is being like, ooh, and what if you start the story and she's already in a time loop? Or what if you start the story and then all of a sudden halfway through another character shows up, and things like that that are just like slightly subversive in terms of how of audience expectations.
Gotcha. And for the future, are you interested in directing another writer's story? Do you feel that you're more drawn to, creating the story and then directing it?
I'm I'm definitely open to it. It's a real never say never situation.
Right.
It just has never quite happened that I've come across a script that I'm like, wow, this is so perfect. And sometimes I think about what Tarantino said about Jackie Brown, where he's very proud of it, but he's also like, but that wasn't my story, it was someone else's book.
Hmm.
And, that not that I come up with the coolest, best ideas in the world, but the ideas I come up with are only things I can come up with. And I feel like those other scripts that are out there, those other books that are out there, those other stories that are out there, other people can make them. But if I don't write my own things, they'll never come to pass. I almost feel a responsibility to prioritize my ideas. But I don't know. I mean, like, I remember when I was in film school, reading The Social Network, the Aaron Sorkin script, but before it had even gone into production. It was just like I found the script online. And I remember reading the first like 10 pages of it, which is just the dialogue scene back and forth between Jesse Eisenberg and Rooney Mara. And it was like the best writing I've ever read in my life, like those first 10 pages. I'm sure if I had read that script as a director, I would have been like, absolutely, I would direct this. Absolutely. Um, but that's, that's Aaron Sorkin. That's like one of the best writers ever. So yeah, I think if I found the right thing and I felt like I connected a lot to it, and I felt like I got along with the writer, and I feel like, we had a good rapport and could make something special together, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Mhm.
But it's not something I necessarily like go out of my way to look for.
Gotcha. Is there anything that you feel that that would interest you in those stories? Is there anything that you kind of, when you're reading a script, that you are kind of trying to, what kind of draws you to something that you would eventually work
I
on?
think honestly, I'm more drawn to something that feels like I wouldn't have written it. I think if it's something that feels similar to the stuff I write kind of tonally, I would just be like, well, I'll just write this. Like I'm more interested in something that's like, like Social Network is a good example where it's just like I can't write all that lawyer dialogue. I'm not gonna write all that stuff. Um, that would like, but it still has an emotional core that I understand. Something like that that just feels like it's very well researched. It's very grounded in a fully real world, but it's not necessarily the kind of thing I normally do. That would be something that I would be more interested in. Um, but for what I like, yeah, usually it's interesting characters, it's human psychology, it's things like that. It's I don't have any desired, or I don't know if that's true or not, but right now I feel like I don't have much desire in I mean, that's just plot for plot's sake. Like it has to have some interesting insight about what it's like to be a person. I feel like that's the stuff that I find myself thinking about more and more, especially the past few years. So right now, that's probably what I would look for. It's like stories where you learn something about people and how people behave and interact with each other.
Gotcha. Have you ever encountered a creative block, and what do you do to kind of break that wall down to continue?
Yeah, I had, um, I mean, I was also working on Omni Loop at the time, but in 2017, 2018, I had a development deal at FX to do a bunch of animated shorts for them. And I ended up doing about 5 shorts. Um, but that was a really hard time for me. I thought I was going to be able to do them a lot faster, but they kept not being quite right, and I kept having to sort of like try the same script over and over and over and over and over again, and I really didn't enjoy the experience of it. And that's probably the closest I've gotten to just feeling like a block where I was just like, I don't even know what this story is or what the point of this. And it was hard because it was the first time, maybe one of the only times in my life where I felt like I was kind of making content. Like I felt like I had come up with a decision with the need to make something before I had the idea to make it. So it was like, oh, I have to make something. And I
Hmm.
didn't quite have the thing that I wanted to write. And it just felt like, there were not bad ideas, but they were not ideas that needed to exist possibly. Um, and I just remember hitting my head on against the wall over and over and over again, trying to get them to be perfect. And eventually what I realized is, I mean, this is a strange lesson, but they didn't need to be perfect. They were actually really good. I just was like, I couldn't let go of the ideas for some reason. I couldn't like just settle. And I think sometimes probably the best thing is to pause, go work on something else, whether it's another script, another idea, or whether it's just like go do a painting, go on vacation, take a break. It doesn't necessarily get better the more you kind of bang your head against the wall.
Hmm.
Um, at the end of the day, all we can do as filmmakers is um, reflect life back to the world. And if you don't have life coming in, it gets very hard to like reflect that life back. So sometimes the answer is just to like step away and like live life for a little bit. And that's usually for me, that's where ideas will come from. Or sometimes they also come from just like watching an incredible movie that just like reminds you of like why we do this. But it's all the answer is always just to get outside of your head because, you know, go hang out with friends, go work on other stuff, go watch movies. But yeah, that would be that was how I got over that at least.
Gotcha. I have a similar style of doing it. Tend to just kind of shelf the project until the creative spirit kind of pops back in.
Yeah.
What are the things do you like to do when you're not focused on a creative project?
Like just what I do for fun.
Yeah, just hobby
That's
wise.
the answer ever. I'm obsessed with watching movies. I watch movies all the time. Every day of my life, I'm watching a movie. Um, I like to play video games. I like to hang out with friends. I like to have one-on-one conversations with people I care about. I hate being in group settings, but you know, if I can go to a park and just catch up with a friend, I find that really nice. I love hanging out with my nephew and my niece. That's probably the most centering thing I do in my life is just get to hang out with them and be silly and goofy, but also just like watch them like grow and become people. That's the
Mhm.
best. I like to walk around, long walks all over the city, all over New York City. I hate being in LA. They don't let me walk over there. But yeah, that's kind of I feel like that sums me up pretty well.
Mhm.
Watch Formula One.
Formula One. Who's your team?
I got really into Formula One the past few years. I can't explain why, but yeah, I'm really
Hey,
into it.
I'm a big Formula One. This hat, it's a Monaco hat.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Who are your guys? Who are your Formula One guys?
So I got into Formula One because of Alonso.
Okay.
So when I was younger, I picked up a Motor Trend magazine, and they
Mhm.
had Alonso was on the cover, and I became a fan of him.
I
Um,
get it. He's a
yeah.
cool guy.
um, but recently, Lando. I've been rooting for Lando recently.
You
So
think he can win this season?
no, there's too much inner conflict with.
Well, I gotta be honest, like I liked Lando a lot. For some reason this season, I was like, I really like Oscar Piastri. Like I
No,
really
yeah,
like Oscar
no,
Piastri.
yeah, no, I get it. There's been times where I'm like, Lando. I don't know about Lando anymore. He's kind of the
Yeah,
guy.
I think he's figuring it out this year, and I think he'll come back even stronger next year. But
Yeah,
that's a really fun team with two really great drivers. I'm I don't know why, but I'm just a big sucker for Lewis Hamilton. I thought his win at Silverstone this year was like the most fun sports thing I ever watched.
yeah,
And I think because I started watching right when he was already like not good anymore, I
mhm,
like really like am into this narrative of like I want him to be good again.
yeah,
But I like most of the drivers actually. It's kind of a fun sport because I like Max. I feel bad for Checo. Like, you know, I like everybody.
yeah. I'm the same way. One of my other guys is Ricardo, and
I know that was
yeah,
heartbreaking.
and it's kind of one of those things is I want him to have a seat, but it's also like I think Liam Lawson deserves a seat, so it's kind of that conflict.
I'm
Um,
just waiting for a Brazilian to get back on the grid, and then I'm all in on him. I don't care about anybody else.
yeah, yeah. Well, the way the driver board has been changing in the next 2 years, you never know. Well, I have one final question. It's going to be um, a, a visual effects question. When filming shots with visual effects in them, does it make you scared or nervous? Because when it comes to visual effects, you don't really know the outcome until you get to post production. So do you kind of have that little like nerve in the back of your mind where you're like, I don't know if this is going to work?
I don't know. I don't allow myself to be in that situation. Is the honest question, even if it sounds like a crazy answer. Is the honest answer, even if it sounds crazy. Like similarly to writing the script and needing to know how it plays out, I won't come up with a VFX with an effect unless I know how I would do it, unless it makes sense in my head of like this is how we would do it. And if I don't have that answer, I'm going to talk to as many people as possible until I know for sure this is how it would do it, this is how it would look, this is how it would work. And so I'm never on set being like, I don't know, they told me they can do it. We'll see what happens. Like if I'm on set, I know what we're going for and I know what we need to make it happen.
Mhm.
Um, there's always a little bit of like an X element of like who knows, but that happens with every scene too. It's like you just don't even know if there's going to be a problem in the camera, if something's going to be out of focus. Like, you just never quite know until you get in the edit. I'm actually weirdly, I would say, more relaxed about VFX just because I know there's so much more that we can do in post and that we'll have more time in post. It's on set in production that I'm always just feel like we don't have time.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, with VFX, worst case scenario, I can always do a couple of all-nighters and do as much as I can on my own. But yeah, I try to always put myself in a situation where at the worst case scenario, like I can figure out a way to do it on my own and make it happen, and I understand the effect.
Hmm.
Um, that just gives me a little peace of mind with it.
Gotcha. Well, that's all I have for you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. They're really, really thoughtful questions. I really appreciate them. Hopefully they were sensible answers.
Yeah, no, they're great. It actually surprises me because I was bouncing around all of my questions because the way you were answering them led to another question. So
Okay.
it was perfect. So,
Well, you're a wonderful interviewer. You did it seamlessly. You did it great.
awesome. Thank you. My final question is, if I end up wanting to post this on YouTube, are you okay with that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You go ahead and
Okay,
post.
cool. I don't know if I will, but
Yeah.
sometime you never know. So, just want to ask.
I'm trying to think if I said anything crazy, but I think I was pretty close.
I think it was pretty went pretty smooth. So,
I
other
didn't say anything crazy. I don't know. Did I say anything crazy about Lando Norris? No, no, no.
uh,
Last
kind
thing I need is Lando tweeting at.
yeah. Well, might make it on Drive for Survivor or
That
something.
I survived. All the drivers are watching my interview and they're talking at
Yeah, that one random interview with the subscriber that has only 6 subscribers. Yeah. Alrighty. I don't have anything else, so yeah,
Well, man, and thank you again for all the work on the movie. You guys killed it. So
yeah,
really to have had you be a part of it all.
of course. Well, thank you for the experience. It was super cool to be able to watch it in theaters. My first film in theaters, so
It
that's super
is.
cool.
It's been
So,
an exciting time. Yeah.
alrighty. You have a good fall, and yeah.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.